Vincent van Gogh, a Dutchman and one of the world's most famous artists. It is estimated he produced over 2,100 artworks, of which about 900 were paintings, and the majority of these in the last 7 years of his life. Today, his known paintings are scattered across the globe. A lot of his most famous works are to be found in prestigious museums located in cities in several continents, but many are held by private collectors. It is exceedingly rare that long-lost Van Gogh paintings are unearthed. But is there another Van Gogh painting waiting to be discovered? A mysterious landscape that seems to have disappeared during the mid-20th century may have just become known once again. Let's explore further. This is one of Van Gogh's most famous paintings. It was created in 1888, and Vincent simply called it Bedroom in Arles. There were actually 3 versions of this painting, and what we are looking at here is the earliest version. Vincent produced this painting of his bedroom in the house where he was staying in the southern French town of Arles. I want to draw your attention to the paintings on the wall. There are 2 portraits on the wall to the right of the bed and what appears to be a landscape above the bedhead. The 2 portraits are most definitely known Van Gogh paintings. One is called The Poet, a portrait of Vincent's friend Eugene Bock, and the other is called The Lover, another of Vincent's friends, Paul Eugene Milliet. So, one might assume that the landscape would have also been a painting created by Vincent and hung over his bed by the artist himself. But nobody has ever been able to identify this painting. But there are clues that the landscape painting actually existed, and probably hung on the wall in Vincent's bedroom in Arles. And what's more, it may have recently been discovered. Let's follow the trail. Our first clues as to the existence of this landscape painting are in several of the letters written by Vincent to his brother Theo van Gogh. Vincent was a tremendous letter writer and wrote many letters to Theo where he often described in great detail the many hardships he suffered and the art he was creating. On 11 June of 1883, Vincent described in a letter to Theo that he wished to paint a landscape with potato diggers. He described in some detail what he planned for this painting. He wrote, "A flat area and a small line of dunes in a corner. In the foreground kneeling figures of women gathering up the potatoes, a row of diggers, men and women, in the background, and in the other corner of the drawing from where the women are gathering up, the spot where the wheelbarrows come." He even wrote that he wanted the landscape to be in the proportion of 1 high to 2 wide. Then on 25 July 1883, he again writes to Theo and describes a painting of a peasant cottage with a red roof under tall trees. He mentions one boy in the potato field and one in the garden by a cane fence. This is a painting that is today unknown. It was in December 1883, driven by lack of income, that Vincent moved to the town of Nuenen in the Netherlands to live with his parents. During this time he painted and sketched weavers, peasants, and farmers at work in the rural landscapes of the area. It is notable that the area suffered from much poverty, and Vincent's paintings from this period were generally dark and somber with earthy colors, particularly dark brown, not the vivid colors that he later became famous for. In late 1885 he moved to Antwerp, and in a letter to his brother on 12 January 1886, Vincent mentions the 5 paintings he took from Nuenen to Antwerp. There were 2 portraits, 1 still life, and 2 landscapes. In another letter to Theo 7 days later, he describes how he showed his 5 paintings to gain access to the Academy of Fine Arts in Antwerp. They were interested in the 2 portraits but found the 2 landscapes and the still life uninteresting. It is thought the Academy found the landscapes too dull. Now what is interesting is that we don't have any details about these 2 landscapes that the Academy rejected. Van Gogh tragically died in 1890. His paintings became the property of his brother Theo, who only survived Vincent by a mere 6 months. The artworks then passed to Theo's widow Johanna van Gogh Bonga. When Vincent died, he was penniless and largely ignored by the art world. But by the early 1900s, his paintings were starting to create interest and then excitement, and he was being seen for the genius that he had been. But let us now jump forward to an exhibition of Van Gogh paintings at the Stedelijk Museum in Amsterdam in 1905. Here is the catalogue that organizes the paintings by where Vincent was living at the time he painted them. In the category Nuenen in Brabant, listed at number 12, is a landscape painting that we know was owned by someone called Frans Buffer. Other than this catalogue, we don't have any details of this painting. There is no description, no notes, nothing. But what we do know is that this Van Gogh landscape listed in this catalogue was purchased at this exhibition by a Dutchman called Willem Pieter Engineeren, so we still have a faint trail to follow. The next and last piece of knowledge we have of this landscape painting is that it was inherited by Willem's nephew. We can only guess, but the painting appears to have passed from Willem to his brother Antony Engineeren. Antony moved to Batavia, the Dutch colonial capital of Indonesia, and what is today Jakarta, in the 1920s. Did he take the Van Gogh landscape painting with him to Jakarta? We also know that Antony's son, the last known owner of the Van Gogh painting, was an engineer in Jakarta right up until the 1950s. We do know there were at least 6 Van Gogh paintings in Jakarta when the Japanese invaded in 1942. These Van Goghs, as part of a larger collection of significant European paintings, were shipped to Indonesia just before war broke out in Europe, and then stayed in Indonesia after Nazi Germany invaded the Netherlands in 1940. The Dutch in Indonesia took these paintings out of their frames and hid them away in crates in the secure vault of the Javanese Bank in central Batavia. It was here that the occupying Japanese discovered them. But incredibly, the Japanese did not take or damage these paintings, and they were in fact recovered and returned to the Netherlands after the war. However, what is interesting is the Japanese attitude to these European paintings. They either did not understand them or were simply not interested. If our mysterious Van Gogh landscape that was owned by Antony Engineeren was also in Jakarta at this time, it is likely it too was left untouched by the Japanese. Most Europeans who were living in Jakarta during the war were interned in civilian prisoner of war camps, and they were forced to abandon their houses and possessions, leaving them unprotected. So, perhaps this Van Gogh painting was also taken off its frame and hidden away. The truth is that there was so much disruption in Indonesia from 1942 to 1945 during the Japanese occupation, and then the Indonesian fight for independence from 1945 to 1949. It is impossible to know with any certainty what happened to the possessions of Europeans during this time. So our trail has gone stone dead cold. Have we lost our mysterious Van Gogh landscape, painting in the chaos and confusion of 7 years of war? Maybe not, because in 1952, a wealthy Indonesian banker by the name of Joko Prawiro acquired a European landscape painting. Joko played a significant role in the establishment of Indonesia's first government after independence in 1945. And then went on to become a successful private banker. It is thought he purchased the painting in Jakarta in 1952. But what was the painting? And is it our mysterious Van Gogh landscape? This is a landscape painting that has been in the possession of the Ward Hanna family in Jakarta for 3 generations. Up until 2017, all the family knew was that this painting was acquired back in 1952 by Joko Prawiro, who is the maternal grandfather of the current owner. Then in 2017, a blind friend of the family was visiting, and when examining the painting with his hands, felt something in the carton at the back of the frame. Upon opening up the carton behind the painting, some labels and a sketch portrait were discovered. The labels seemed to suggest that this was perhaps not just some drab and dusty old landscape, but possibly a Van Gogh. As for the portrait, was this also by the same artist? And then the significance of the signature on the painting hit home. It was signed Vincent. What was discovered was a tantalizing link to the mysterious Nuenen landscape that was sold to Willem Pieter in Nuenen in the 1905 exhibition at the Stedelijk Museum in Amsterdam. The painting that today sits in Jakarta, in the home of the Ward Hanna family, has a label indicating the owner of the painting, Frans Buffer, at the time of the 1905 exhibition, and a number faintly marked on the back. It is the number 12, matching the exhibition catalogue entry. This was incredibly exciting. The family approached a local art dealer, and he suggested that they contact an art dealer that he knew in the Netherlands. The Dutch art dealer, Martin de Joon, was so intrigued he flew to Jakarta to view the artwork in person. He suggested that the family submit the artwork to the Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam, the custodian of the biggest collection of Van Gogh paintings in the world. Let us take a closer look at the painting. It is clearly a Northern European rural landscape. There are some haystacks to the left, and what appears to be potato diggers working near the haystacks. There are some buildings, maybe farmhouses and sheds, to the right of the haystacks, and towering over the buildings and haystacks are tall, heavily foliaged, dark green trees. There are two figures near the buildings behind a fence. The foreground of the painting is a red-brown muddy track leading away to rising ground, with a woman in the midground of the scene. Away in the distance there are hills, or possibly dunes, and on the hill to the right is a village with windmills. There is another figure further afield towards the hill. It is the golden sky that provides an almost majestic light over what is otherwise a somber and drab rural scene. The elements of this painting are eerily reminiscent of descriptions of a painting that Vincent planned to paint, described to his brother Theo in at least 2 letters written June and July of 1883. The first thing to note is that Vincent expressly stated that he wanted the dimensions of the painting to be in the proportion of 1 high to 2 wide. Well, that exactly matches this painting. In the letter of 11 June, Vincent describes a landscape with potato diggers, kneeling figures of women gathering up the potatoes, a row of diggers, men and women in the background, and the spot where the wheelbarrows come. Further, in the letter of 25 July, Vincent describes a painting of a peasant cottage with a red roof under tall trees, and a boy in the potato field and one in the garden by a cane fence. While there is not a precise match between what Vincent described in his letter, the similarities are startling. And it must be remembered that the June letter was clearly a plan for a landscape. Vincent may have then changed or reworked the detail when it came time to execute his ideas. Finally, the color palette used in this painting tend to the dark with earthy colors, particularly dark brown. This was certainly in line with the style of Van Gogh during his time in Nuenen. There was a further clue as to the history of this painting. The frame and the stretcher were not of European timber. They were constructed of a lighter Indonesian wood. So, if this painting had originated from Europe, it had been reframed in Indonesia at some point. This was further evidenced by the fact that the nails holding the canvas to the stretcher were not put through the original holes that must have matched the original frame. This fits with the story of the other known Van Gogh paintings in Indonesia during the war. They too were taken from their frames and hidden in crates to protect them from invaders. Perhaps this painting too was taken from its frame and hidden away by its Dutch owner during the war. Of course, this would only have been done for a painting worth hiding, a painting like a Van Gogh. But here our story takes a disappointing turn. In 2019, the painting was indeed transported from Jakarta to Amsterdam and submitted to the Van Gogh Museum. However, the museum deemed the painting was not genuine. They stated that in their opinion, the painting was not in the recognized style of Van Gogh. However, the Jakarta family was not to give up so easily. They took the painting to 2 noted experts in Europe. In March 2020, the painting was submitted to Professor Koen Janssen at the University of Antwerp in Belgium. Professor Janssen used X-ray fluorescence, or XRF, to scan the painting, which allows not just the surface of the painting to be investigated, but also any layers of paint that may exist beneath the top coats. What was discovered was that the painting was in fact made up of many layers. The artist, or maybe artists, reworked the painting several times. And to add to the mystery, there were objects and details in the earlier layers that were covered up by later applied layers of paint and now no longer visible in the painting. For example, the woman near the road is seen to be carrying a bin, but the scan shows that in an earlier rendition now hidden, she was pushing a wheelbarrow. The scan also turned up additional buildings and people, a house with a tower, a cow with horns, a ploughman with 2 cows, and several churches in the distance. The village with the windmills on the hill that can be seen in the current painting did not exist in earlier versions and were added later. Now, this is not so unusual. Vincent is known to have reworked his paintings many times, often changing them completely by just painting over an earlier rendition, until he was satisfied with the final result. But there is one change that is particularly intriguing. The XRF scan detected that the artist's signature was changed, not once, but twice. The earliest detected signature seems to begin with a V and was painted over. Then there is a later signature that appears to have been erased, and finally we have the signature that is on the painting today, a red bold Vincent. The XRF scan can also indicate exactly what paints were used to create the artwork. The analysis indicated that there were certainly paints that would have been used by Vincent. In particular, the painting contains the color Prussian blue, which is the same color that Vincent used to paint the famous Starry Night artwork. But the painting also contains paint that would not have been available to Vincent, specifically the pigment titanium white. This is certainly an unexplained question when considering whether this painting is a genuine Van Gogh. The painting was also submitted to Professor Erik Postma at the University of Tilburg in the Netherlands. Professor Postma uses artificial intelligence to analyze paintings for style, content, and physical properties in an attempt to detect fakes. Although not conclusive, Professor Postma noted there was nothing to indicate this painting was a fake and could very well be a genuine Van Gogh. Oh, and there is one more fascinating element to this painting. There is a human hair trapped in the paint of this artwork sitting in Jakarta. The hair appears to be red. Vincent was known to be a redhead. Of course, there is no record of Van Gogh's DNA. After all, he died in 1890. But it is fascinating to think that if this painting is a genuine Van Gogh, and this hair belongs to the artist, then this could very well be a hair from the head of one of the world's most famous artists. So where does this leave us, and the family who still have the painting in Jakarta? After the studies performed by Professor Janssen at Antwerp University and Professor Erik Postma at the University of Tilburg, the owner of the painting returned to the Van Gogh Museum and presented the additional findings and research. However, the museum remained unconvinced. If anything, they found the evidence resulting from the XRF scan and the presence of titanium white pigment to be compelling evidence in support of their position. They stated that the most Van Gogh-like element in the painting, the Montmartre-style barns and windmills in the distance, contains titanium white, which suggests these features were added in the 20th century, long after Van Gogh's death. There are, of course, several possible explanations as to the true nature of this painting. We know the painting contains several layers. It is possible that the painting was originally painted by Vincent van Gogh, but then was painted over by another artist. This has happened before. Another explanation is that this is a genuine Van Gogh and Vincent painted the earliest layers back in 1883, continued to rework the painting in Nuenen, which explains the colors and style, but then further modified the painting when he was in Paris, and then Arles. This might explain the windmills added later. Or maybe it is actually a clever fake altered to fit the story of the mysterious missing landscape painting. It remains a fascinating mystery with a trail of compelling clues. The famous bedroom in Arles' painting seems to contain a landscape painting that has never been identified. There is a mysterious landscape painting that is mentioned on several occasions in letters from Vincent to his brother Theo. These letters seem to suggest the painting was started while Vincent was living in northern Netherlands, but may have been reworked many times, and the latest changes may have been when Vincent was living in Arles. A Van Gogh landscape painting was owned by Frans Buffer and exhibited at the Stedelijk Museum in Amsterdam in 1905, where it was purchased by Willem Pieter Engineering. We also know that the painting was passed to Willem's brother, Antony, because Antony left it to his son, and we know that Antony moved to Jakarta in the 1920s, and that his son was an engineer in Jakarta in the 1950s. So it is highly plausible that a genuine Van Gogh landscape painting was taken to Jakarta. Then this painting faded from view. The question is, did Joko Prawiro, a successful and well-connected private banker, acquire this painting in 1952? The painting in Jakarta does have the label on the back that references the owner Frans Buffer, and also the number 12, which links it to the catalogue of the 1905 exhibition. It is, of course, the discovery of these by the family in 2017 that brought this fascinating story to light. Time will tell whether it can indeed be proven that this is in fact a genuine painting of the famous Dutch master, Vincent van Gogh.